During the peak of the Cold War, Germany produced one of the greatest tanks of all time, combining firepower, armor and mobility to create one of the most renowned tanks ever produced. Having been born out of the remains of an extremely ambitious project, the German Leopard 2A6 is one of the greatest feats in Germany's tank production in the Cold War. After the fall of Nazi Germany in 1945, Germany's tank reputation collapsed. The tanks that were produced by Nazi Germany in the early stages of the Second World War heavily revolved around fast and reliable tanks such as the Panzer I, II, III and IV. However, when the tide of the war changed, the tank production changed with it. Nazi Germany was then placed on the defensive, and therefore the tanks weren't made for lightning-fast attacks or blitzkrieg. Instead, they produced some of the largest and heaviest tanks of the entire war, ranging from Panthers and Tigers to the Maus and E100. German tank production was basically put on bigger guns and more armor. This heavily contrasted what was to become the tanks of the Bundeswehr. With the increasing threat of a nuclear conflict between the US and USSR, if any war were to break out, well, Germany was slap bang in the middle of it, quite literally. Germany was split in two, consisting of East and West Germany. The East was supplied by Communist Russia in the Warsaw Pact, and the West was mainly supplied by the US. Tanks such as Soviet T-55s and T-64s, as well as T-72s, posed a great threat to West Germany and her Western allies. So, the Germans were allowed to produce tanks, thus giving birth to the Leopard 1. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the Leopard 1, that is for a later video coming in a few weeks. We are here to talk about the Leopard 2, not the Leopard 1. Germany and the USA decided to make a joint program in order to create a new MBT, which was later designated to be the MBT-70 or KPZ-70. This project was extremely ambitious, with costs going well over budget. The project was further abandoned and Americans made one final version, the prototype XM803. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, I just wanted to keep my videos short. I don't know much about it, so I'll make a video on it later. So, back to the story. The XM803 project was abandoned and turned into the XM1 project, which later turned into the M1 Abrams. The Germans took the development of the KPZ-70 and used it to create a new MBT, which was designated Leopard 2, and was to be under the weight of 50 tons. Krauss-Maffei then further developed this concept, which became the Leopard 2 Killer, which was then further developed into the Leopard 2K. The 2K was introduced in 1972, with the first prototype having experimental modifications of torsion bar suspension with friction dampers. The second prototype had hydropneumatic suspension, which was originally developed for the KPZ-70. However, this new suspension was not deemed to be fully capable or suited for the tank and therefore was not used at that stage. The 2K was also fitted with a new Rheinmetall L44 120mm smoothbore gun. The 2K was also lightly armoured, which allowed for extreme mobility and speed. There's not many visual differences between a Leopard 2K and a Leopard 1A3 or 1A4. However, the improved gun and increased mobility would definitely separate the two tanks. The Leopard 2A1, 2A2, 2A3 and 2A4 were gradual changes made to the Leopard, with the Leopard 2A4 being the most famous as it had refinements and more than 1,800 being made, and by 1994 more than 2,125 Leopard 2s in service were of this variation, and it was also widely exported. With Turkish, Swiss, Danish, Swedish and many more recipients of the Leopard 2A4. However, there are still some issues. With the gunner's optics on the right cheek of the turret, it was significantly weaker than the rest of the turret cheek and became a weak spot. Turkey also lost a few Leopard 2A4s in 2016 and were mainly due to how the tanks were used and not the tank's fault. They were on a tall hill and were targeted by RPGs and ATGMs, which is not how the Leopard 2 is to be used. It is meant to be used as a fast tank which flanks and destroys enemies from medium to long range, not standing on an open ridge with no idea where the enemy is. During mid-1998, the latest Leopard finally came, the Leopard 2A5. It had new armour on its turret cheeks, and it was in a wedge shape, which helped deflect eroding kinetic energy rounds. You might think that the wedge-shaped turret cheeks would create a similar problem that the Panther A faced in World War II, which was a shot trap on the Panthers. However, the wedge-shaped turret cheeks on the Leopard 2A5 is proven not to ricochet shells into sensitive areas. In the crew compartments, additional spall liners help reduce the amount of spalling caused by a shell that managed to successfully penetrate the crew compartment. The traverse systems of the turrets were all made electric, thus allowing for easier maintenance and better reliability. Because of the new turret wedges, the gunner's sight could not be in the turret cheeks, so it was moved to the top of the turret. In addition, the commander and gunner's sights could use thermal and night vision, allowing for the commander to see things much more clearly and the same things as the gunner could. The original L44 main gun was changed to the L55 120mm smoothbore gun, which again was developed by Rheinmetall and could fire a new round, the DM53 APF-SDS, armor-penetrating fin-stabilized discarding sabot shell, instead of the DM33 APF-SDS shell. The Leopard 2A6 featured a new improved gun which was longer than the L55 on the 2A5 and could fire much heavier rounds, which increased the muzzle velocity. The 2A6 also featured more anti-mine protection under the belly of the tank. The Leopard 2 PSO was developed by KMW and was developed for urban combat. The PSO stands for Peace Support Operations. The Leopard 2 PSO had an additional dozer blade, as well as close-range cameras and other modifications for urban combat. The tank was displayed at Eurosatory in 2008, however, no orders were placed. The most modern version of the Leopard 2 is the Leopard 2A7 and 2A7 Plus, which both have upgrades for Canadian and Bundeswehr use, and also further protection against ATGMs and RPGs. I don't really know that much about the 2A7, there isn't really much information about it, because it came out a few years ago, so I can't really get some good facts down like I did on the Ersat 710 or the Panther G, so these will have to do. Quite a number of derivatives have been produced, such as the Leguan bridge layer and the Bergpanzer BPZ-3 Buffel. Various export versions of the Leopard 2 series have been made, such as the Swedish Stridsvagn 122, which is a Swedish alteration of the Leopard 2A5. Quite a few countries have made tanks that resemble the 2A4 and 2A5, such as the Indian Argent tank or the Japanese Type 90, which shows a few similar features to the 2A4, such as the same Rheinmetall L44 120mm gun. The American M1 Abrams also has a similar Rheinmetall L44 gun. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share and comment, as it motivates me to build these tanks and to write these essays about these vehicles for your entertainment. Turn on the notification bell on the subscribe button so you will be notified on when the next video will come out, which is a British MBT. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, stay safe and goodbye.
Geschütz geladen! Geschütz geladen!